Hello, this is Miss Carla. This is Charlie. Say hi, Charlie. Charlie is my cat, of course, and she's a female, even though Charlie can sometimes be a male name. We did actually, when my sister and I named her, we thought that she was a boy because she was a little kitten, and it's hard to tell with little baby kittens whether they're boys or girls. When I took her to her very first vet visit when she was just a couple months old, right after I got her, I said I had two male cats, Charlie and Oliver, and the vet looked at Charlie. Are you sure? Charlie's a boy? And he examined her, and he said, well, Charlie's a girl. So we decided to keep her name as Charlie because we thought it was cute. And she, her name was never short for Charles or anything else. It was just Charlie. So we decided we could keep it. Oliver was a boy, so that works out because otherwise Oliver doesn't really sound like a girl name. We could have changed it to Olivia, I suppose. Anyway, this is Charlie. She likes attention, especially when I'm trying to do something on camera. So today, we're going to start a new chapter book. And I had to pick this time from books that I already own on my bookshelf. And I wonder if I can... It'd be cool if I could turn my camera around to show you. Maybe I'll do that, figure out how to do that next time. I do have two big, tall, 6-foot-tall bookcases in my office here, filled with books. And about a third of those books are middle grade books for kids. I also have some picture books and a whole bunch of adult books, and a bunch of teen books. I have another bookcase in my bedroom full of teen books. Anyway, I had to look through those books and see what I could read for our next chapter book, since I finished the selections I had from the Rhode Island Latino Books Month award. Charlie, don't touch the keyboard. And I had said I wanted a book featuring a boy main character, since we had all girls last time. And so the book I found is Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library by Chris Grabenstein, Charlie. And thank you to Random House for permission to read this aloud. So you can kind of see it looks mysterious and exciting. I see some numbers on a spin, almost like a game spinner. We'll see. It's supposed to be pretty good. It has, on here it says a New York Times bestseller. And here is a quote from James Patterson, who has written a lot of good books for adults and kids, especially like mystery ones. And he says, discover the coolest library in the world. So that's a pretty good quote about this book. So let's see how the book starts. I'm going to go ahead and take that dust jacket off like I did with Read-Aloud. Oh, and it's nice spring colors, a nice mint green, sky blue. Ooh, and the text on the spine is shiny gold. I like that. Oh, and I don't remember where I got this book. I probably got it secondhand, possibly online, because for a while I would buy pretty regularly from a website that sells used books. But look at that. That's the author's signature. So this is a signed book, which is pretty nifty. I have quite a few books that are signed by authors, usually because I go and visit the authors and have them sign the book, which is just really exciting. This one I did not meet the author. I believe I bought it this way, secondhand, but it's still pretty cool. Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's library. Chapter 1. I don't think we're going to have really many pictures in here, but oh look, a little die. Growing up, I always called one of these a dice, but then I learned that dice is plural. So if you have more than one, it's dice. If you have 2 or 3 dice. But if you have one, it's just a die. I usually still say dice because it sounds weird to me. This is how Kyle Keeley got grounded for a week. First, he took a shortcut through his mother's favorite rosebush. Yes, the thorns hurt, but having crashed through the brambles and trampled a few petunias, he had a 5-second jump on his oldest brother, Mike. Both Kyle and his big brother knew exactly where to find what they needed to win the game inside the house. Kyle had already found the pine cone to complete his outdoors round, and he was pretty sure Mike had snagged his yellow flower. Hey, it was June. Dandelions were everywhere. "Give it up, Kyle," shouted Mike as the brothers dashed up the driveway. "You don't stand a chance." Mike zoomed past Kyle and headed for the front door, wiping out Kyle's temporary lead. Of course he did. 17-year-old Mike Keeley was a total jock, a high school superstar. Football, basketball, baseball. If it had a ball, Mike Keeley was good at it. Kyle, who was 12, wasn't the star of anything. Kyle's other brother, Curtis, who was 15, was still trapped over in the neighbor's yard dealing with their dog. Curtis was the smartest Keeley, but for his outdoors round, he had pulled the always unfortunate "Your Neighbor's Dog's Toy" card. Any dog card was basically the same as a lose a turn. As for why the 3 Keeley brothers were running around their neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon like crazed lunatics, grabbing all sorts of wacky stuff, well, it was their mother's fault. She was the one who had suggested, "If you boys are bored, play a board game." So Kyle had gone down into the basement and dug up one of his all-time favorites, Mr. Lemoncello's Indoor-Outdoor Scavenger Hunt. It had been a huge hit for Mr. Lemoncello, the master game maker. Kyle and his brothers had played it so much when they were younger, Mrs. Keeley wrote to Mr. Lemoncello's company for a refresher pack of clue cards. The new cards listed all sorts of different bizarro stuff you needed to find, like an adult's droopy underpants, 1 dirty dish, and a rotten banana peel. At the end of the game, the losers had to put everything back exactly where the items had been found. It was an official rule, printed inside the top of the box, and made winning the game that much more important. While Curtis was stranded next door trying to talk the neighbor's Doberman, Twinkie, out of his favorite tug toy, Kyle and Mike were both searching for the same 2 items, because for the final round, all the players were given the same riddle card. That day's riddle, even though it was a card Kyle had never seen before, had been extra easy. Find 2 coins from 1982 that add up to 30 cents, and one of them cannot be a nickel. Duh! The answer was a quarter and a nickel, because the riddle said only one of them couldn't be a nickel. So to win, Kyle had to find a 1982 quarter and a 1982 nickel. Also easy. Their dad kept an apple cider jug filled with loose change down in his basement workshop. That's why Kyle and Mike were racing to get there first. Mike bolted through the front door. Kyle grinned. He loved playing games against his brothers. As the youngest, it was just about the only chance he ever got to beat them fair and square. Board games leveled the playing field. You needed a good roll of the dice, a lucky draw of the cards, and some smarts. But if things went your way and you gave it your all, anyone could win. Especially today, since Mike had blown his lead by choosing the standard route down to the basement. He'd gone through the front door, tear to the back. He'd go through the front door, tear to the back of the house, bound down the steps, and then run to their dad's workshop. Kyle, on the other hand, would take a shortcut. He hopped over a couple of boxy shrubs and kicked open the low-to-the-ground casement window. He heard something crackle when his tennis shoe hit the window pane, but he couldn't worry about it. He had to beat his big brother. He crawled through the narrow opening, dropped to the floor, and scrabbled over to the workbench, where he found the jug, dumped out the coins, and started sifting through the sea of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. Score! Kyle quickly uncovered a 1982 nickel. He tucked it into his shirt pocket and sent pennies, nickels, and dimes skittering across the floor as he concentrated on quarters. 2010, 2003, 1986. Come on, he muttered. The workshop door swung open. What the? Mike was surprised to see that Kyle had beaten him to the coin jar. Mike fell to his knees and started searching for his own coins just as Kyle shouted, "Got it!" and plucked a 1982 quarter out of the pile. What about the nickel? Demanded Mike. Kyle pulled it out of his shirt pocket. You went through the window? Said a voice from the outside. It was Curtis, kneeling in the flower beds. Yeah, said Kyle. I was going to do that. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. I can't believe you won, moaned Mike, who wasn't used to losing anything. Well, said Kyle, standing up and strutting a little. Believe it, brother, because now you two losers have to put all the junk back. I am not taking this back to Twinkie, said Curtis. He held up a very slimy, knotted rope. Oh, yes, you are, said Kyle, because you lost. Oh, sure, you thought about using the window. Kyle, mumbled Curtis, you might want to shut up. What? Come on, Curtis. Don't be such a sore loser just because I was the one who took the shortcut and kicked open the window and... You did this, Kyle? A new face appeared in the window. Their dad's. Chuckled Mike behind Kyle. You broke the glass? Their father sounded ticked off. Well, guess who's going to pay to have this window replaced? That was why Kyle Keeley had 50 cents deducted from his allowance for the rest of the year and got grounded for a week. Chapter 2. Halfway across town, Dr. Yanina Zinchenko, the world-famous librarian, was walking briskly through the cavernous building that was only days away from its gala grand opening. Alexandriaville's new public library had been under construction for 5 years. All work had been done with the utmost secrecy under the tightest possible security. One crew did the exterior renovations on what had once been the small Ohio City's most magnificent building, the Gold Leaf Bank. Other crews, carpenters, masons, electricians, and plumbers, worked on the interior. No single construction crew stayed on the job longer than 6 weeks. No crew knew what any of the other crews had done or would be doing. And when all those crews were finished, several super secret covert crews, highly paid workers who would deny ever having been near the library, Alexandriaville, or the state of Ohio, stealthily applied the final touches. Dr. Zinchenko had supervised the construction project for her employer, a very eccentric, some would say loony, billionaire. Only she knew all the marvels and wonders the incredible new library would hold and hide within its walls. Dr. Zinchenko was a tall woman with blazing red hair. She wore an expensive, custom-tailored business suit, jazzy high-heeled shoes, a Bluetooth earpiece, and glasses with thick red frames. Heels clicking on the marble floor, fingers tapping on the glass of her very advanced tablet computer. Dr. Zinchenko strode past the control center's red door under an arch and into the breathtakingly large circular reading room beneath the library's 3-story tall rotunda. The bank building, which provided the shell for the new library, had been built in 1931. With towering Corinthian columns, an arched entryway, lots of fancy trim, and a mammoth, shimmering gold dome. The building looked like it belonged next door to the triumphant memorials in Washington, D.C., not on this small Ohio town's quaint streets. Dr. Zinchenko paused to stare up at the library's most stunning visual effect, the Wonder Dome. 10 wedge-shaped, high-definition video screens, as brilliant as those in Times Square, lined the underbelly of the dome like so many orange slices. Each screen could operate independently or as part of a spectacular whole. The Wonder Dome could become the constellations of the night sky, a flight through the clouds that made viewers below sense that the whole building had somehow lifted off the ground, or, in Dewey Decimal mode, 10 sections depicting vibrant and constantly changing images associated with each category in the library cataloging system. I have the final numbers for the fourth sector of the Wonder Dome in Dewey mode, Dr. Zinchenko said into her Bluetooth earpiece. 364.1092. She carefully over-enunciated each word to make certain the video artist knew what specific numbers should occasionally drift across the fourth wedge amid the swirling social sciences montage featuring a floating judge's gavel, a tumbling teacher's apple, and a gentle snowfall of holiday icons. The numbers, however, should not appear until 11 a.m. Sunday. Is that clear? Yes, Dr. Zinchenko, replied the tinny voice in her ear. Next, Dr. Zinchenko studied the holographic statues projected into black crepe-lined recesses cut into the massive stone piers that supported the arched windows from which the Wonder Dome rose. Why are Shakespeare and Dickens still here? They're not on the list for opening night. Sorry, replied the library's director of holographic imagery, who was also on the conference call. I'll fix it. Thank you. Exiting the rotunda, the librarian entered the children's room. It was dim, with only a few work lights glowing, but Dr. Zinchenko had memorized the layout of the miniature tables and was able to march, without bumping her shins, to the story corner for a final check on her recently installed geese. The flock of 6 audio animatronic goslings, fluffy robots with ping-pongish eyeballs, created for the new library by Imagineers who used to work at Disney World, stood perched atop an angled bookcase in the corner. Mother Goose, in her bonnet and granny glasses, was frozen in the corner. This is Librarian 1, said Dr. Zinchenko, loud enough for the microphones hidden in the ceiling to pick up her voice. Initiate Storytime sequence. The geese sprang to mechanical life. Nursery rhyme. The geese honked out, "Ba, ba, black sheep," in 6-part harmony. Treasure Island? The birds yo-ho-hoed their way through 15 men on a dead man's chest. Dr. Zinchenko clapped her hands. The rollicking geese stopped singing and swaying. One more, she said. Squinting, she saw a book sitting on a nearby table. Walter the Farting Dog. The 6 geese spun around and farted, their tail feathers flipping up in sync with the noisy blasts. Excellent. End story time. The geese slumped back into their sleep mode. Dr. Zinchenko made one more tick on her computer tablet. Her final punch list was growing shorter and shorter, which was a very good thing. The library's grand opening was set for Friday night. Dr. Z and her army of associates had only a few days left to smooth out any kinks in the library's complex operating system. Suddenly, Dr. Zinchenko heard a low, rumbling growl. Turning around, she was eyeball to icy blue eyeball with a very rare white tiger. Dr. Zinchenko sighed and touched her Bluetooth earpiece. Ms. G, this is Dr. Z. What is our white Bengal tiger doing in the children's department? I see. Apparently there was a slight misunderstanding. We do not want him permanently positioned near the Jungle Book. Check the call number 599.757. Right, he should be in zoology. Yes, please, right away. Thank you, Miss G. And, like a vanishing mirage, the tiger disappeared. Chapter 3. Of course, even though he was grounded, Kyle Keeley still had to go to school. Mike, Curtis, Kyle, time to wake up, his mother called from down in the kitchen. Kyle plopped his feet on the floor, rubbed his eyes, and sleepily looked around his room. The computer handed down from his brother Curtis was sitting on the desk that used to belong to his other brother, Mike. The rug on the floor with its Cincinnati Reds logo had also been Mike's when he was 12 years old. The books lined up in his bookcase had been lined up on Mike's and Curtis's shelves, except for the ones Kyle got each year for Christmas from his grandmother. He still hadn't read last year's edition. Kyle wasn't big on books, unless they were the instruction manual or hint guide to a video game. He had a Sony PlayStation. Oh, sorry. He had a Sony PlayStation set up in the family room. It wasn't the high-def Blu-ray PS3. It was the one Santa had brought Mike maybe 4 years earlier. Mike kept the brand new Blu-ray model locked up in his bedroom. But still, clunker that it was, the 4-year-old gaming console in the family room worked. Except this week. Well, it worked, but Kyle's dad had taken away his TV and computer privileges, so unless he just wanted to hear the hard drive hum, there was really no point in firing up the PlayStation until the next Sunday when his sentence ended. When you're grounded in this house, his father had said, you're grounded. If Kyle needed a computer for homework during the last week of school, he could use his mom's, the one in the kitchen. His mom had no games on her computer. Okay, she had Diner Dash, but that didn't really count. Being grounded in the Keeley household meant you couldn't do anything except, as his dad put it, think about what you did that caused you to be grounded. Kyle knew what he had done. He'd broken a window. But hey, I also beat my big brothers. Good morning, Kyle, his mom said when he hit the kitchen. She was sitting at her computer desk, sipping coffee and tapping keys. Grab a toaster tart for breakfast. Curtis and Mike were already in the kitchen, chowing down on the last of the good toaster tarts, the frosted cupcake swirls. They left Kyle the unfrosted brown sugar cinnamon, the ones that tasted like the box they came in. New library opens Friday, just in time for summer vacation. Kyle's mom mumbled, reading her computer screen. Been 12 years since they tore down the old one. Listen to this, boys. Dr. Yanina Zinchenko, the new public library's head librarian, promises that patrons will be surprised by what they find inside. Really? Said Kyle, who always liked a good surprise. I wonder what they'll have in there. Books, maybe? Said Mike. It's a library, Kyle. Still, said Curtis. I can't wait to get my new library card. Because you're a nerd, said Mike. I prefer the term geek, said Curtis. Well, I gotta go, said Kyle, grabbing his backpack. Don't want to miss the bus. He hurried out the door. What Kyle really didn't want to miss were his friends. A lot of them had Sony PSPs and Nintendo 3DSs, loaded with lots and lots of games. Kyle fist-bumped and knuckle-knocked his way up the bus aisle to his usual seat. Almost everybody wanted to say hey to him, except, of course, Sierra Russell. Like always, Sierra, who was also a 7th grader, was sitting in the back of the bus, her nose buried in a book. Probably one of those about girls who lived in tiny homes on the prairie or something. Ever since her parents divorced and her dad moved out of town, Sierra Russell had been incredibly quiet and spent all her free time reading. Nice shirt, said Akimi Hughes as Kyle slid into the seat beside her. Thanks. It used to be Mike's. Doesn't matter. It's still cool. Akimi's mother was Asian, her dad Irish. She had very long jet black hair, extremely blue eyes, and a ton of freckles. "What are you playing?" Kyle asked, because Akimi was frantically working the controls on her PSP 3000. "Squirrel Squad," said Akimi. "One of Mr. Lemoncello's best," said Kyle, who had the same game on his PlayStation, the one he couldn't play for a week. "You need a hand?" "Nah." "Watch out for the beehives." "I know about the beehives, Kyle. I'm just saying." "Yes." "What?" "I cleared level 6. Finally." "Awesome." Kyle did not mention that he was up to level 27. Akimi was his best friend. Friends don't gloat to friends. "When I shot the squirrels at the falcons," said Akimi, "the pilots parachuted. If a squirrel bit the pilot in the butt, I got a 50-point bonus." Yes, in Mr. Lemoncello's Catapulting Critters game, there were all sorts of wacky jokes. The falcons weren't birds, they were F-16 Falcon fighter jets. And the squirrels? They were nuts. Totally bonkers, with swirly whirlpool eyes. They flew through the air, jabbering gibberish. They bit butts. This was one of the main reasons why Kyle thought everything that came out of Mr. Lemoncello's imagination factory, board games, puzzles, video games, was amazingly awesome. For Mr. Lemoncello, a game just wasn't a game if it wasn't a little goofy around the edges. "So, did you pick up the bonus code?" asked Kyle. "Huh?" "In the freeze frame there." Akimi studied the screen. "Turn it over." Akimi did. "See that number tucked into the corner? Type that in the next time the home screen asks you for your password." "Why? What happens?" "You'll see." Akimi slugged him in the arm. "What?" "Well, don't be surprised if you start flinging flaming squirrels on level 7. Get out." "Try it. You'll see." "I will, this afternoon." "So, did you write your extra credit essay?" "Huh? What essay?" The one that's due today about the new public library." "Refresh my memory." Akimi sighed. "Because the old library was torn down 12 years ago, the 12-12-year-olds who write the best essays on why I'm excited about the new public library will get to go to the library lock-in this Friday night." "Huh?" "The winners will spend the night in the new library before anybody else even gets to see the place." "Is this like that movie, Night at the Museum? Will the books come alive and chase people around and junk?" "No, but there will be free movies and food and prizes and games." All of a sudden, Kyle was interested. All right, Chapter 4. "So exactly what kind of games are we talking about?" "I don't know," said Akimi. "Fun book stuff, I guess." "And do you think this new library will have equally new computers?" "Definitely." "Wi-Fi?" "Probably." Kyle nodded slowly. "And this all takes place Friday night?" "Yep." "Akimi, I thought you just discovered a way for me. Oh, Akimi, I think you just discovered a way for me to shorten my most recent groundation." "Your what?" "My game-deprived parental punishment." Kyle figured being locked in a library with computers on Friday night would be better than being stuck at home without any gaming gear at all. "Can I borrow a pen and a sheet of paper?" "What? You're going to write your essay now? On the bus?" "Better late than never." "They're due in homeroom, Kyle. First thing." "Fine, I'll keep it brief." Akimi shook her head and handed Kyle a notebook and a pen. The bus bounced over a speed bump into the school driveway. He would need to make his essay really, really short. He was hoping the 12 winners would be randomly pulled out of a hat or something, and, like the lottery people always said in their TV commercials, you just had to be in it to win it. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Charles Chiltington was sitting in his father's library, working with the college student who'd been hired to help him polish up his extra credit essay. He was dressed in his typical school uniform, khaki slacks, blue blazer, button-down shirt, and tastefully striped tie. He was the only student at Alexandriaville Middle School who dressed that way. What's a big word for library? Charles asked the tutor. Teachers love big words. Book repository. Bigger, please. Athenaeum. Perfect. It's such a weird word, they'll have to look it up. Charles made the change, saved the file, and sent the document off to the printer. Your dad sure reads a lot, said his ELA tutor, admiring the leather-bound books lining the walls of Mr. Chiltington's home library. Knowledge is power, said Charles. It's one of our fundamental family philosophies. Another was, we eat losers for breakfast. Kyle and Akimi climbed off the bus and headed into the school. You know, said Akimi, my dad told me the library people had like a bazillion different architects doing drawings and blueprints that they couldn't share with each other. How come? To keep everything super secret. My dad and his firm did the front door, and that was it. The second they stepped into Mrs. Cameron's classroom for homeroom period, Miguel Fernandez shouted, Hey Kyle, check it out, bro. He held up a clear plastic binder, maybe 2 inches thick. I totally aced my essay, man. The library, Delio? Yeah, I put in pictures and charts, plus a whole section about the ancient library of Alexandria, Egypt, since this is Alexandriaville, Ohio. Cool, said Kyle. Miguel Fernandez was super enthusiastic about everything. He was also president of the school's Library Aid Society. Hey, Kyle, you know what they say about libraries? Not really. They have something for every chapter of your life. While Kyle groaned, the second bell rang. All right, everybody, said Mrs. Dana Cameron, Kyle's homeroom teacher. Time to turn in your extra credit essays. She started walking up and down the rows of desks. The judges will be meeting in the faculty lounge this morning to make the preliminary cut. Crap, thought Kyle. There were judges. This was not going to be a bingo ball drawing like the lottery. Mr. Keeley? The teacher hovered over her desk. Did you write an essay? Yeah, sort of. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Either you wrote an essay or you didn't. Kyle half-heartedly handed her his hastily scribbled sheet of paper. And, unfortunately, Mrs. Cameron read it out loud. Balloons. There might be balloons. The classroom erupted with laughter. Until Mrs. Cameron did that tilt down her glasses and glare over them thing she did to terrify everybody into total silence. This is your essay, Kyle? Yes, ma'am. We were supposed to write why we're excited about the grand opening, and, well, balloons are always my favorite part. I see, said Mrs. Cameron. You know, Kyle, your brother Curtis wrote excellent essays when he was in my class. Yes, Mrs. Cameron, mumbled Kyle. Mrs. Cameron sighed contentedly. Please give him my regards. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Cameron moved on to the next desk. Miguel eagerly handed her his thick booklet. Very well done, Miguel. Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. Kyle heard an odd noise out in the parking lot. A puttering, clunking, clanking sound. Oh my, said Mrs. Cameron. I wonder if that's him. She hurried to the window and pulled up the blinds. All the kids in the classroom followed her, and then they saw it. Out in the visitor parking lot, a car that looked like a giant red boot on wheels. It had a strip of notched black boot sole for its bumper. Thick shoelaces crisscrossed their way up from the window shield to the top of a 10-foot-tall boot collar. It looks like the red boot from that game, said Miguel. Family Frenzy. Kyle nodded. Family Frenzy was Mr. Lemoncello's first and probably most famous game. The red boot was one of 10 tokens you could pick to move around the board. A tall, gangly man stepped out of the boot car. It's Mr. Lemoncello, gasped Kyle, his heart racing. What's he doing here? It was just announced, said Mrs. Cameron. This evening, Mr. Luigi Lemoncello himself will be the final judge. Of what? Your library essays. Let's see. These chapters are so short. We'll do one more, and then we'll be done for today. Eating lunch in the cafeteria. Chapter 5. Eating lunch in the cafeteria, Kyle stared at his wilted fish sticks, wishing he could pull a magic take another turn card out of thin air. I blew it, he mumbled. Yep, Akimi agreed. You basically did. Can you imagine how awesome that new library is going to be if Mr. Lemoncello and his imagination factory guys had anything to do with it? Yes, I can. And I'm kind of hoping I get to see it too. After all, I wrote a real essay, not one sentence about balloons. Thanks. Rub it in. Akimi eased up a little. Hey, Kyle, when you're playing a game like Sorry and you get bumped back 3 spaces, do you usually quit? No. If I get bumped, I play harder because I know I need to find a way to get back those 3 spaces and pull ahead of the pack. Hey, guys! Miguel Fernandez carried his tray over to join Kyle and Akimi. He was being followed by a kid with spiky hair and glasses the size of welder's goggles. You two know Andrew Peckelman, right? Hey, said Kyle and Akimi. Hello. Andrew is one of my top library aides, said Miguel. Cool, said Akimi. Mrs. Youngans, the librarian, just confirmed that Mr. Lemoncello is the top secret benefactor who donated all the money to build the new public library. $500 million. She heard it on NPR, added Peckelman, who more or less talked through his nose. So we did some primary source research on Mr. Lemoncello and his connection to Alexandriaville. What'd you find out? Asked Kyle. First off, said Miguel, he was born here. He had 9 brothers and sisters, added Andrew. All of them crammed into a tiny apartment with only 1 bathroom over in Little Italy, said Miguel. And, said Peckelman, sounding like he wanted to one-up Miguel, he loved the old public library down on Market Street. He used to go there when he was a kid and needed a quiet place to think and doodle his ideas. And get this, said Miguel eagerly, Mrs. Tobin, the librarian back then, took an interest in little Luigi, even though he was just, a kid like us. She kept the library open late some nights and let him borrow junk from her desk or her purse. Thimbles and thumbtacks and glue bottles, even red Barbie doll boots, stuff he used for game pieces so he could map out his first ideas on a library table. Then, Andrew jumped in, then Mrs. Tobin took Mr. Lemoncello's sketch for Family Frenzy home to her husband, who ran a print shop. They signed some papers, created a company, and within a couple of years they were all millionaires. But Miguel had the last word. Now, of course, Mr. Lemoncello is a bazillionaire. What are you 4 nerds so excited about? Said Haley Daly as she waltzed past the gaggle of popular girls in her royal court. Haley was the princess of the 7th grade. Blonde hair, blue eyes, blazingly bright smile. She looked like a walking toothpaste commercial. We're pumped about Mr. Lemoncello, said Miguel. And the new library, said Andrew. And, said Kyle melodramatically, just seeing you, Haley. You are so immature. Come on, girls. Haley and her friends flounced away to the cool kids' table. Check it out, said Akimi, gesturing toward the cafeteria's food line, where Charles Chiltington was balancing 2 trays, his own and one for Mrs. Cameron. I'm so glad you have lunchroom duty today, Mrs. Cameron, Kyle heard Chiltington say. If you don't mind, I have a few questions about how conventions within genres, such as poetry, drama, or essays, can affect meaning. Well, Charles, I'd be happy to discuss that with you. Thank you, Mrs. Cameron. And may I say that sweater certainly complements your eye color. What a suck-up, mumbled Akimi. Chiltington's trying to use his weaselly charm to make sure Mrs. C sends his essay up the line to Mr. Lemoncello. Don't worry, said Kyle. Mrs. Cameron isn't the final judge. Mr. Lemoncello is, and since he's a genius, he will definitely pick the essay you guys all wrote. Undoubtedly, said Peckelman. Thanks, Kyle, said Miguel. I just wish you could win with us, said Akimi. Well, maybe I can. Like you said, this is just a move back 3 spaces card. A take a walk on the boardwalk when someone else owns it. It's a shoot in Chutes and Ladders. A detour to the molasses swamp in Candyland. Yo, Kyle, said Miguel. Exactly how many board games have you played? Enough to know that you don't ever quit until somebody actually wins. He picked up his lunch and headed for the dirty tray window. Akimi called after him. Where are you going? I have the rest of lunch and all of study hall to work on a new essay. But Mrs. Cameron won't take it. Maybe, but I've got to roll the dice one more time. Maybe I'll get lucky. I hope so, said Akimi. Me too. See you guys on the bus. That's the end of chapter 5. We are now on page 29, chapter 6, which is where we will start tomorrow. I am really enjoying this book. I think it is wonderful. It's adorable and funny, and it already has some little puzzles in it. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I was flipping through it earlier. I don't know what this is, but about halfway through the book, there's a page that looks like this. And I don't know what that means, but I think it's some kind of puzzle. And I can't wait till we get there and get to figure it out. Okay. As you probably figured out, I'm excited about this book because it's about a library. And it has librarians in it. And I'm a librarian. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this book. Have a good day. I will see you tomorrow.